This is so unfair that Stevie Nicks got all the attention and all the hype. But it was Christine McVie who wrote the most famous songs of Fleetwood Mac. People sing along to them at concerts, they have been played on the radio for decades, but most have no idea it was Christine who wrote them. Her words and her melodies are hidden behind the band's bigger personalities. If you really want to see how great she was, here are the 5 best songs Christine McVie ever wrote for Fleetwood Mac. And trust me, every single one of them proves she was the band's secret weapon. The 5 iconic songs. Probably one of the most iconic gems that Fleetwood Mac sang is Songbird. And yes, it was written by Christine McVie. The most impressive thing is that she wrote it in 30 minutes. It was during a late-night session while Fleetwood Mac was recording Rumors in 1977. The melody came to her so suddenly and completely that she stayed awake until morning. She said that she was afraid she would forget it if she went to sleep. That's why she stayed up until she had recorded all of it. The recording process was quite minimal. Instead of adding the usual layers of guitars and drums that defined Fleetwood Mac's sound, McVie kept it stark. Just her voice and piano. They recorded it at Berkeley's Zellerbach Auditorium, using the empty concert hall's natural acoustics to give the song space to breathe. The decision proved to be right as Songbird became one of their most powerful live moments. They routinely used it to close shows, and this left audiences in complete silence. What made this track especially significant was its placement on Rumors. This was an album that was otherwise consumed with relationship breakups and band drama. While Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were channeling their romantic warfare into songs like Go Your Own Way, McVie offered something entirely different. John McVie later noted that Songbird had a physical effect on audiences during live performances. Grown men would openly cry in arenas across the world. After Christine's death in November 2022, the song took on even deeper meaning as fans revisited what many consider her most personal statement. By 1987, Fleetwood Mac had changed completely. Tango in the Night represented their full embrace of 80s production values. There were synthesizers, drum machines, and studio polish that would have been unthinkable during their blues rock origins. Everywhere emerged from this environment. It was perhaps McVie's most commercially savvy composition, but the creative process was anything but smooth. The band could barely function as a unit by this point. They were having arguments and walkouts during the studio sessions. There was barely concealed hostility between members who had been through too much together. Buckingham's perfectionist tendencies had reached extreme levels. He would often require dozens of takes for single parts. Yet McVie somehow filtered out this chaos to create a song that radiated pure happiness. The opening chimes, the layered harmonies, and her effortless vocal delivery perfectly hid the dysfunction happening behind the scenes. Everywhere became one of Fleetwood Mac's most streamed songs decades later. Streaming data shows that McVie's optimistic tracks often outlast the band's more dramatic material. The song's construction was so sophisticated. What sounded simple actually required precise arrangement and production choices that made every element serve the overall mood. Christine McVie also gave us the iconic "You Make Loving Fun." The backstory of this song added even more drama to Rumors, which was already filled with soap opera-level tension. McVie wrote the song about Curry Grant. He was Fleetwood Mac's lighting director. But the thing is, she wrote it while she was still married to bassist John McVie. Those days, she was performing with him on stage every night. It was messy, both professionally and personally. To avoid a blow-up, she told John the song was about her dog. This gossip actually shaped the music. On Rumors, "You Make Loving Fun" is the only song that celebrates new love instead of heartbreak. McVie's voice shines with real happiness you can feel. The groove is locked in perfectly, and the hook sticks in your head instantly. The whole production captures the glow of someone who is truly in love. Years later, when McVie admitted the real inspiration, it only made the song's legacy stronger. It became proof that even during Fleetwood Mac's most chaotic period, moments of genuine joy could still break through. A few years later came Hold Me. This was released during another turning point for the band. After the experimental Tusk album confused some fans, the 1982 record Mirage marked a return to a more radio-friendly sound. McVie's Hold Me came from a very personal place. She had just ended her relationship with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, and that breakup gave her the emotional spark to write it. The song also showed one of Fleetwood Mac's best vocal pairings, McVie's warm, steady delivery, alongside Lindsey Buckingham's sharper harmonies. It sounded like a real conversation about love's ups and downs, and given their shared history in the band, it sort of was. Hold Me was a huge hit in the US. This song spent 7 weeks in the top 5. Strangely, it didn't even chart in the UK, something music insiders still scratch their heads over. Part of what made Hold Me so strong was how it balanced catchy pop appeal with real emotion. The sparkling production and upbeat rhythm made it perfect for radio, but if you listened closely, you could hear the heartbreak underneath. McVie had mastered the trick of wrapping sad truths in songs that felt light and accessible. Then came Little Lies in 1987, one of Fleetwood Mac's last big global hits during their golden era. McVie co-wrote it with her then-husband Eddie Quintella. The hook, Tell Me Lies, Tell Me Sweet Little Lies, worked both as a sing-along chorus and as a sharp comment on self-deception. Musically, it was pure, late 80s, but underneath all the shiny production was a timeless idea: how people choose to believe comforting falsehoods instead of facing uncomfortable truths. McVie rarely explained her lyrics in detail. This always left fans to interpret them, but Little Lies clearly explored the idea of wanting to hear what feels good rather than what's real. The song's success showed that McVie still had chart power even after 20 years in the industry. It became a staple of 80s playlists and one of Fleetwood Mac's most recognizable tracks. And considering the band members could barely stand each other at that point, the fact they managed to create something so universally appealing and polished was nothing short of remarkable. When you look at these songs, it is clear McVie had a special place in Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham often poured their personal chaos into fiery, dramatic songs. McVie, on the other hand, had a gift for taking the same kind of turmoil and turning it into warm, relatable music. She wrote tracks that could dominate the radio while still carrying real emotional weight. Her style was never about overcomplication or clever wordplay. She preferred honesty and clarity. That's why her songs connected so deeply. Whether it was the heartfelt simplicity of Songbird or the sophisticated pop sheen of Little Lies, Christine McVie's songwriting kept Fleetwood Mac not only relevant, but thriving through decades of lineup changes, personal battles, and musical shifts. Her songs had already proven she could turn even the messiest band drama into timeless music. But behind those hits was a life story just as fascinating. She lived a life that started far from the bright lights of Los Angeles, wound its way through smoky blues clubs in England, and even brushed against the history of the Titanic. Before we get to the later chapters of her career, let's go back and remember Christine McVie from the very beginning. Remembering Christine McVie. Christine McVie was born Christine Perfect on July 12, 1943, in Bouth, Lancashire, England. She was one of those rare musical figures who blended deep emotional resonance with effortless charm. From a young age, she was steeped in music. She took piano lessons when she was a child, and by her teenage years, she was already immersed in the local music scene around Birmingham. She polished her skills and at the same time developed a quiet confidence that became her strength. In 1963, before Fleetwood Mac even existed, Christine married John McVie, and through that, gradually became connected with the band John was in. But long before that, she had already made a name for herself. She joined Chicken Shack as a lead vocalist and keyboardist. It was a blues band that was earning serious steam in the British blues boom. Her voice gave Chicken Shack a lift. Their version of I'd Rather Go Blind in 1969 featured Christine in luminous form. It came from a place you could feel deep in your chest. Her playing was just as impressive. There is something about her piano work. It was clean, understated, and emotionally precise. She would always let the song speak. In Chicken Shack, she began to understand her own voice as both a singer and songwriter, and that foundation laid the emotional core of everything she would later create. In 1970, Fleetwood Mac was already known for blues rock driven by Peter Green, but the band was searching for a new direction. Christine and John were invited to join. Christine brought songwriting chops, singing prowess, and a warm musical presence, exactly what the band needed. Soon they relocated to Los Angeles, and from this new meeting of creative minds, the most iconic era of Fleetwood Mac was born. Christine wrote real love songs, intimate songs, songs that were confessions and celebrations of everyday moments. Her music was always accessible, but never simple. Over My Head, Say You Love Me, You Make Loving Fun, Hold Me, Little Lies. Each became popular on radio, yes, but they also felt like an honest exchange. In these songs, she translated her pain and drama into something universal, something listeners could immediately grasp. Beyond the music, Christine had many hobbies. She brought a passionate curiosity to everything she touched. She loved horses and countryside life. Her home in Devon became a quiet haven for her. After decades of rock and roll tours and LA frenzy, this retreat offered balance. She also loved gardening. She famously surrounded herself with roses. It was as if her inner world mirrored the warmth of her songs. The inspiring thing about her is that she didn't get instant fame. She kept growing, kept learning, and with steady growth claimed her place in the music world. The band's 1975 self-titled Fleetwood Mac album was the turning point. Suddenly, the group was everywhere, and Christine was stepping more visibly into the spotlight. Her songs like Over My Head and Say You Love Me were proving their commercial value. These were steady hits that balanced Buckingham's stylized production and Nicks's mystical lyricism. She grounded the group with humanity and everyday life. After rumors became super famous, Christine didn't change her style. She resisted big gestures and instead cared about the emotion, the line between hopeful and heartbreaking. And she wasn't just a singer or keyboardist. She co-produced, co-wrote, in short, she shaped the overall tone of the group. She was the emotional barometer. Christine's musical partnerships sometimes flew under the radar, but they were beautiful. Her duets with Lindsey Buckingham had an intimacy you could feel, rooted in their complicated but creative personal dynamic. Even when the band imploded around them, their voices fit together like twin confidences. She also ventured outside Fleetwood Mac occasionally. Before joining the band, she recorded solo sessions that revealed different textures. Later, she returned to solo work again in the mid-80s and 2000s. Finally, it's worth noting that beyond the music, Christine is remembered for something rare in rock culture: her gentleness. Tour friends and crew often recounted her kindness: backstage tea with biscuits before shows, laugh lines around her eyes, genuine interest in people. She was a diva, but she was also quietly gracious. In a band that generated its fair share of chaos and egos, Christine was peace. Christine's life away from the spotlight had been calm, almost secluded, but Fleetwood Mac was never built for peace, the end of an era. The band's personal lives were a tangled web of love affairs, rivalries, addictions, and grudges that never really healed. That mix of brilliance and dysfunction was both their greatest creative fuel and the reason the classic lineup eventually fell apart. At the heart of it were two couples who had once been in love, Christine and John McVie, Stevie Nicks, and Lindsey Buckingham. John and Christine's relationship had already been strained by John's alcoholism. He admitted this problem openly later in life. Being together on the road all the time only made things worse. Even after their 1976 divorce, they remained connected. Christine was godmother to John's daughter Molly, and he would be at her bedside when she died decades later. But the marriage itself couldn't survive the constant touring, substance abuse, and the pressures of fame. Christine eventually had an affair with the band's lighting director, Curry Grant, which inspired You Make Loving Fun. To avoid a public blow-up, she lied to John that the song was about her dog. Stevie and Lindsey's split was even more complicated. They had been together long before Fleetwood Mac. They started in the band Fritz. Neither of them wrote songs back then. Stevie was the stronger songwriter early on, and Lindsey was the bassist. But producer Keith Olsen encouraged them to ditch the group, move to Los Angeles, and start writing their own material. Lindsey's bout with mononucleosis kept him home for months, where he developed his guitar style and production skills. By the time they were brought into Fleetwood Mac in 1975, they were partners in both music and life. But once their romantic relationship ended, they became locked in a creative rivalry. Each inspired and infuriated the other, and the intensity never really faded. Their conflicts were not just emotional, they sometimes turned physical. Fans still debate about the details and severity. There have been many rumors, but there were indeed some well-documented incidents. In 1980, Lindsey kicked Stevie on stage. In 1987, during a meeting at Christine's house before the Tango in the Night tour, Stevie charged at him in anger after he announced he wasn't going on the road. He chased her outside and allegedly choked her against a car. Stevie later admitted she initiated the confrontation, but the moment became one more scar in their history. Both had their share of bad behavior. Stevie was deep into cocaine at the time and had her own reputation for volatile outbursts, while Lindsey could be controlling and aggressive. Their relationship was an endless cycle of attraction and resentment. Outside of these personal battles, the band's inner circle was just as chaotic. Stevie had an affair with Mick Fleetwood while he was still married to Jenny Boyd, a woman she considered a close friend. The revelation ended Mick's marriage for good. Christine had been rumored to have her own short-lived relationships within the band's orbit, and John's drinking often made him unpredictable and at times threatening. The mid-1980s brought some of the worst of the drama. During the making of Tango in the Night, Lindsey was frustrated with the band's lack of focus and substance abuse. Stevie was coming off a grueling solo tour and struggling with addiction and exhaustion. Christine was weary of the whole machine. The album was a commercial triumph, but by the time it was finished, Lindsey had decided he couldn't tour. His departure was a major rupture. Billy Burnett and Rick Vito were brought in to fill the gap, but the signature Buckingham-Nicks-McVie dynamic was gone. By the 1990s, Christine was openly talking about leaving the road. She had developed a fear of flying and longed for a quieter life in England. Years of hotels, airports, and the constant pressure to perform had drained her enthusiasm. She was the band's peacemaker, the one who could bridge the gap between Stevie and Lindsey, and without her, the balance would be nearly impossible to maintain. There were brief reunions. These were heard at President Bill Clinton's 1993 inauguration, where the Rumors lineup performed Don't Stop, but those rumors didn't last. In 1995, the band, now with Becca Bramlett and Dave Mason, released Time. The album flopped critically and commercially. This revealed just how far they had drifted from the sound and chemistry that made them famous. In 1998, Christine McVie left for good. The decision came the same year the Rumors lineup was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They performed together that night. It was a bittersweet reminder of what they once were. Christine returned to her home in Kent. She retreated almost entirely from public life. Without her, Fleetwood Mac could still tour, but the soul of the group was gone. Stevie and Lindsay's unresolved tensions flared up again during later reunions. In 2018, after a Music Cares tribute show, Lindsay was fired from the band. The official story was that he had mocked Stevie during her speech, but the cause was never confirmed. Lindsay sued, the case was settled, and he accused Stevie of pushing him out. She later admitted she had given the band an ultimatum. Either he goes, or she does. By then, decades of personal history had hardened into grudges. Mick Fleetwood remained friends with everyone, acting as the band's diplomat and business anchor, but even he couldn't bridge the divide anymore. The Rumors 5 had given the world some of the most enduring songs in rock history, but the relationships behind those songs were too damaged to sustain. The end was the slow grinding down of a machine that had been running on tension for too long. Even when they smiled for the cameras, there were years of bitterness in the room, and when Christine finally stepped away, it was like removing the last stabilizing force. Fleetwood Mac lost the quiet center that had kept them from flying apart sooner. By the time she was gone, the era that began with the Fleetwood Mac album in 1975 and reached its peak with Rumors was truly over. Now tell us, what's your favorite song written by Christine McVie? Write its lyrics in the comments below. And before you go, make sure to subscribe to our channel if you want more updates on your favorite stars. Goodbye for now.